Happy Thursday to everyone out there. Lucky Lefty podcast. The Onora boys are in the building. Onora Whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com. It is that premium American whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com. And if you're going to drink, by all means, make sure that you drink responsibly. Fox Sports, The Athletic, whatever other outlet. This dude is a legend at this point. Author, college football, NFL, high school football. Bruce Feldman joins the show on the other side, back end of the show. Talk about college football, the season, things that stood out. Talk some NIL and his story that he wrote in the Athletic, man, which was fabulous, man. Following high school athletes all the way up to the NFL All-Pro team, seeing how important 5-star is in recruiting rankings, man, when it comes to the NFL. Some good stuff. I can't wait to follow that up on the conversation we had with Manny Navarro yesterday. And we're going to talk about some of the things that stood out with Manny Navarro that he brought up. And then I think one of the things I really want to dive into is some projections, right? So ESPN put out their college football projections, like Heisman, freshman phenoms, surprises, and Heisman candidates. I don't want to talk about the Heisman candidate because we've talked about that, but I want to know who's going to be the freshman phenom for Notre Dame. It was pretty easy to see that Benjamin Morrison was the freshman phenom for Notre Dame this year. I would ask, who was the surprise of the season? Left. Who was the surprise of the 2022 season? And who do you think is going to be the surprise of the 2023 season? That's the LL question of the day. Apple Podcast, Spotify, CFB Nation in conjunction with Irish Breakdown. Go download all of our great content. Leave 5 stars. We greatly appreciate it. Then leave your comments. We read all comments. We respond to all comments, man. Because of LL Nation, you have made us one of the fastest growing podcasts centered around Notre Dame football, and we greatly appreciate you. It's the Lucky Lefty podcast. We spin it different. So let's start right there, Left. Expectations. I guess we can start with this. How legitimate of a Heisman candidate is Sam Hartman, in your opinion?
Provided everything goes right, I think he's good enough to get in the room. I don't know if he's going to be the top number one voted for, but I think he can get 5th or 4th in the race for sure. We just want him to get it there, a flight to New York. Winning it, I think it'd take a guy like a Kenny Minchie or a Carr to be in the system, be under a Marcus Freeman-led team. That's his guy kind of thing. I just don't think Sam Hartman has more talent than Caleb Williams, and if it came down to who's more talented to win out for a Heisman candidate.
So it's, you know what? Every Heisman candidacy comes down to 2 or 3 games, right? Like literally, Caleb Williams won the Heisman back-to-back
Because of
weeks.
Notre Dame.
No. It wasn't just Notre Dame. It was UCLA and Notre Dame back-to-back weeks. The great game, the great performance against UCLA, then facing Notre Dame in the Coliseum and putting on that performance. It was a wrap. That was it. You usually need 2 games that people can point to say, that's the moment. That's the Heisman, right? Because even though Texas A&M and Johnny Manziel weren't contenders for a national championship, Johnny had 2 games, one in particular on the road against Alabama, where it was just like, that's a Heisman moment. So, Ohio State, USC, Clemson. 2 of those games have to be Heisman moments for Sam Hartman, in my opinion.
3.
At least minimum 2 or 3 have to be Heisman moments. More than likely, I would say it would be Clemson on the road Clemson on the road and Ohio State at home.
But that also means that we're winning because of Sam Hartman, and I don't think that he will be the reason why we win. I think he'll be a great catalyst for guys that we really could depend on to be breakout players this season to win games for us. But for him to be the Heisman candidate winner, he would have to be the reason why we beat Clemson away in Ohio State, meaning he's got 400 yards, clutch touchdowns. He's out there one-man team. Our offense is built sort of for that, but that's not how Sam has made his money. Sam has made his money on being a good distributor of the football. But I think, anything can happen. He's definitely got the talent to be taken to New York. And that's my expectation. If you win it, then damn, you exceeded anything I thought you could have did.
Excuse me. I agree with that. I agree with that. It's interesting you say that because I think moving forward, most people will assume that Drake May and Caleb Williams will more than likely win the award.
Yeah, one of them.
My biggest surprise of last season, I'm gonna be honest. I would say my biggest surprise for 2022 was Xavier Watts.
Yeah, of course.
I would say it was Xavier Watts. And I thought about doubling up with Benjamin Morrison. But Benjamin Morrison, I got to watch him, like I said, I got to watch him in fall camp. And when I watched him in fall camp, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, this dude he's for real.
Yeah.
He's gonna be nice. I thought about Logan Diggs. Because I'll go back, look, the antics on the sideline at the blue and gold game, being upset because he didn't get the ball on the play. Then he injures his shoulder. He was homesick his freshman year, battled through that. Really didn't have a chance to prepare. This is his first offseason, healthy, being able to go hard in the offseason. So he's probably going to come back even stronger and better next year. And for him to perform the way he did, I didn't expect that. I didn't, because things were trending not negatively, but kind of like you felt like, okay, he is who he is, but he really elevated his game. So he was a candidate. Jaden Thomas is someone that you could say was a surprise, right? Even though we
No, we
heard
talked
about him in
about
the bowl
Jaden
game. Right.
Thomas in the
Yeah.
spring.
Yeah, we
And
did.
his important role as the third receiver growing into the number one. And, I think we were pretty on point about him specifically, but more
But
so
not to tease our Back to the Future on Monday, which is featuring the Marshall game. He did some bad things in that Marshall game, and he recovered nicely. But you're right. You're right. We spoke glowingly about him in the spring. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Xavier Watts as my biggest surprise of 2022 left.
Yeah, Xavier Watts from a surprise of impact, because not only did he get in at sort of a new position, but he made an impact right away. And so I think he was going to be my easy choice. But I think my biggest surprise for this year, it's kind of tough. I think we pretty accurately talked about what was going to take place in terms of players on the scene.
Yeah.
I think my biggest surprise probably was the non-impact, or the impact that wasn't as expected, getting our transfer from Northwestern. I thought that would be what we were high on in the spring. Oh, tell me what he doesn't do better than Kyle Hamilton. Kyle Hamilton's doing pretty good with the Ravens. He came on strong towards the end of the season for sure. So I think that was my biggest surprise. I thought you would have been way more impactful based off of what we were seeing early. I mean, everything was pointing towards, you being the next first round outside of Kyle. I thought we about to be safety you for a minute.
Yeah, I got misled the way he was picking Drew Pine off in practice consistently. I should have known that it was more about Drew Pine and not him, really.
See,
And
that's what you got to look at.
in hindsight,
So what you got? Are you really going against the top of the top doing that?
making one-handed interceptions, two-handed interceptions over his head. It was the same quarterback the whole time.
Same quarterback.
And I just never really thought about it. Is this really Drew Pine? Or is this more about Brandon Joseph? In hindsight,
Because what is Arizona State going this year? 6-6. You know,
heck,
so it's like
it's the Pac-12. You never know, bro.
it's gonna be tough because they got some good quarterback play in that Pac-12.
Who wins more games, Arizona State or Colorado?
Oh, Colorado. I trust Shador. I think Shador can match up with some of those.
Oh, they definitely have a better quarterback.
I mean, but it's pretty thick in the Pac-12 right now.
I think Shador could have, when you go out west and you get that close to Hollywood, he could have made a better choice than Storm Reed, but it is what it is. And he kind of rushed that, in my opinion. Like, yo, pump the brakes, bro.
Just let it happen.
Pump the brakes. This happened kind of quick. Chill. I'm being petty. I'm being petty. No, I'm being petty. That's an insider. She's a student at USC, and some things have transpired. So that's me just being a little petty.
Just in the scoop because you got eyes and ears.
Right.
You got eyes and ears. You know what I'm saying?
Lucky Lefty podcast. Yo, I saw a comment. I think was it Jay Carr? Yeah, Jay Carr. Thank you for tapping in as you always do, my brother. Zeke Correll was a pleasant surprise. Absolutely. Zeke Correll struggled a little bit, and he really came back. Was an anchor, was spoken glowingly about Jacob Lacey and other defensive linemen as being one of the most difficult and technically sound linemen to deal with on a consistent basis. And to have him back, as the captain and the center this year for Sam Hartman and the quarterbacks, that's a big deal. That's a big deal moving forward.
Pretty big deal. I
mean, like, just not, it's bigger than just, snapping the ball, which is a huge part of a play, getting the snap off. But having your center to be, for a quarterback, especially a transfer quarterback, having a center that's smart, really good, and can control schemes, blocking schemes, call out what needs to be done, that's huge. That takes a lot off the shoulders of Sam Hartman.
It does, especially when you're trying to still integrate getting into an offense for 1 year, and how things can really be. I think that control piece of being at that position can really help the quarterback settle in a lot faster, even though I do think Sam could probably handle a lot of that being as experienced as he is. But having two heads at doing it can really make it come together smoothly, especially if we switching quarterbacks in and out potentially, and having the mind of having the cadence for both quarterbacks, that matters. And having experience at that position can only help identify and strengthen that center of the offense, to where we can really be in a lot of games like we are every year. I mean, I don't think we've been in a position where it's just outmatched outright, where we're not close to winning, So I think that comes a lot from that center of the offense.
Someone said Howard Cross. Howard Cross.
We talked about him too, though.
Yeah, but Howard Cross balled out in 21, dude. Like the game against Wisconsin, the game against Cincinnati. Howard Cross has flashed for a couple of years. I don't know. I expected Howard Cross to play well last year. So he to me, it really wasn't a surprise. But you did something interesting by going the opposite way. The play of Isaiah Foskey early was a huge surprise to me.
Mm.
And I'll honestly say the actions of some of the seniors on this team early in the season off the field
Mm.
is a huge surprise to me.
That's
I tell
right.
you now, there were some dudes on this squad that were seniors that were, yeah, I'll use the word jerk. I could be a little bit stronger, but they were jerks.
It keeps the GC
Yeah, they were
on
flat out
brand.
jerks. They were flat out jerks. And it was really to the detriment of the team early on. So that was a huge surprise to find out. And I'm gonna be honest, bro. The inconsistency of Drew Pine was a surprise to me.
Why?
It just was, bro. I didn't think it was that to that point. Even sitting there watching the blue and gold game. Remember when people after blue and gold game were like, man, it's the blue and gold game. Don't worry about it. It's just a scrimmage. You know, you go watch the blue and gold game, that's who he was.
Yeah.
That's who he was. Inconsistent. Can play one game really good. The next game is like you can play one half really good. The next half, you know.
Yeah, the inconsistency definitely was a surprise considering how competitive the spring and fall camp were on guys competing to get a spot, thinking that consistency from practice, how
Yeah.
Marcus Freeman preached about, would translate to the game. But, football is a complex sport when evaluating talent.
Hmm.
And fortunately, some guys are great practice players and not the same on the field in game time. Some guys are not great practice players, but always find a way to impact the game in some way. That's just how it is and how delicate the process is. That's why it goes to the same. You can't coach everybody the same,
Yeah.
and it's the same way you can't evaluate everybody the same. Now you can
Right.
have fundamental discipline to certain things you want to do, but I mean, you can know the whole playbook and not be good at executing it. And I think that's what frustrates us when we think about guys like Tobias Merriweather, who obviously doesn't know every aspect of the playbook like a Braden Lindsay, but can produce more than a Braden Lindsay can produce. So you need him out there.
Hmm.
So I think it is a nice complex mix of why it's hard on being a coach getting paid that much, because you got to know how to balance it. Because a lot of people think it's a one-way thing,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
never a one-way way of doing it. Even Bill Belichick, as militant and disciplined as it is, it has some success, but as you can see, without certain players, it just can't come together all the way. It only goes so far.
Works both ways, right?
So
Like
it works both ways.
certain players need that to develop. And I tell people this all the time. Tom Brady didn't come to the NFL as Trevor Lawrence, as Pat Mahomes, ready to go.
I mean, these guys are playing ready to go.
He needed time to develop. So he needed that system to be able to develop into the guy that he developed into. And in my opinion, you're extremely blessed as an athlete when you can come in and win Super Bowls while still developing. Because that's not the natural order.
Right.
That's not the natural order. Like they beat the greatest show on turf because of that defense, right? A running game that went over 120 yards kept Kurt Warner off the field and Marshall Falk off the field. And then Tom Brady was able to make one or two plays.
Yeah, and that's where you
Key
see
plays.
guys, and it's that's what the it factor is as well. Guys that can
Yeah.
come in right away and impact on a level it's an anomaly, like a Joe Burrow.
Hmm.
He's only been in the league for 3 years and is on pace for 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. That's not the regular way, quarterbacks develop in the league.
No, no, you
Jordan Love
don't
hasn't touched a real snap,
at all.
and he's been drafted way, for a
Yeah,
minute now, and that was a first round pick. That's usually how it's supposed to go. I mean, Aaron Rodgers did it that way. Tom Brady's done it that way. But for a guy like Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes to come in the first 2 or 3 years they played, have so much success, that's why they get the credit that they get. And then you get the false credit when you
hmm
get hype like that and aren't actually winning anything like Josh Allen. And then now they're like, well, maybe we made a mistake.
but Josh Allen is closer to the norm.
Closer to the norm after the smoke
Uh,
settles.
a kid that is going through the ups and downs of learning, and
That's yeah, that's
Josh Allen
normal.
2 years from now might be
Might be better than what we saw.
right.
But you got guys that are striking while it's hot now, and that's giving them the credit that they're giving. But either way it goes, it's not an easy thing to just put together the right combination of guys just because they're all practicing well. I
Yeah,
think some guys just operate a little different, but it's a little different you need to be able to make plays in amongst of the best competition.
we're talking biggest surprises of the 2022 season, and our guy Adam Shipley, thank you for tapping in. He said biggest surprise to me was the frustrating play of Maris Leofow. Expected a lot from him.
I mean,
And
what did
once
you expect?
you know
Manti
what,
Te'o?
dude, Maris Leofow, I think taking a step back and let me give some brutal honesty. The fact that Maris Leofow made it through the season healthy was the key for him. You're talking about a dude that really wasn't even practicing during the fall. Like Notre Dame really wasn't talking about it, but he really wasn't even practicing. And when he practiced, he was doing maybe like 40%. And remember when Marcus Freeman gave that speech, like we don't like our guys to practice half speed.
Yeah.
Like, no, if you can't go full speed, we don't want you practicing. That was pretty much about Maris Leofow, man. Like he physically wasn't right, and they really brought him along, and he didn't get a lot of reps in fall camp because they just wanted him to be healthy. They didn't want to take the chance of him being injured or getting injured. So they kind of babied him and coddled him. So really, when he started playing, that was camp for him.
Yeah, you can see that he needed some more reps.
Yeah, that was
And he's
camp for
like,
him.
you look like you just trying to figure it out on the fly
hmm
instead of being in a groove or a routine like you've been doing it. And that's just because you could tell there was something missing with Mary. She like, yeah, we like him and we remember some flashes, but it's just like a skip on the game. It's like something just he's missing that piece. And I think, like you're
Yeah,
right, resting him when he really could have been pushing it to get some experience, so that that talent developed instead of still being raw. It just looked raw out there.
yeah,
I mean, put somebody in there that know what they doing. That's what people probably felt that time. But he just was just raw. He was still on the highlight mode that he gave us the previous year because he didn't have that development. He was hurt.
yeah.
He missed those camps.
It's a good Jacob C. Thank you for tapping in. Biggest surprise was lack of an emerging wide
Why?
receiver. Yeah, I don't, dude. You pretty. I know. I expected Chancey Stuckey to at least
Improve
take
the
two,
technique
3 years.
and the talent of the
Yeah,
room and grow the
yeah,
room to be ready.
yeah.
But
I think we saw the improvement from a technical aspect of that room, but I didn't expect anybody to just.
there wasn't a trust factor on play calling to even give them a chance. And when it was like we're either hit or missing it, or they're not. Maybe because we don't know what they talk about.
hmm
Maybe they've schemed some things up to hit guys outside, and we're not confident in hitting it, so we hit inside. But it didn't look like there was a lot of trust to depend on the receivers to win us a game either.
Yeah, yeah. I see people in the chat saying the linebackers being a surprise. Uh, until I mean, the linebacker position at Notre Dame is pretty much until further notice, right? Like
Yeah, really.
until we see it,
Till we see it.
until we see it, you know, and fully expect JD Bertrand to be the leader out there this year with Prince Collie, Jalen Sneed, Nolan Ziegler, and some of the other guys sprinkled in. Hopefully, like Manny Navarro told us, when you have the best talent on your team, they should take the majority of the snaps as starters in their second year. And hopefully that's what we're going to see from this second year uh, linebacker core group.
Yeah.
Jalen Sneed, Ziegler, Junior Tuilamaka has already moved to the defensive line. Jaden Osbury and Drake Bowen, I think, they should take a year. Take a year, learn the game, special teams, get better, because the guys in front of them should be ready to go and make an impact.
Yeah, it's time to see some of those young guys flash, and the
Mhm.
Marcus Freeman era really kick off with guys he put a lot of effort in recruiting, and the older guys that he wasn't head coach for should really fill in as a role. I mean, not too many places in the country letting too many fifth year guys come back, letting too many older guys come back because it's a young man sport. But for Notre Dame's a different place. But I think it's about role playing and everything that you're doing. So for those young guys, like JD Bertrand's going to be in there, but as a responsible senior fifth year guy, hopefully bringing those young guys up on his way out.
Lucky Lefty Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, CFB Nation in conjunction with Irish Breakdown. You already know we spin it different. 2023, projecting surprises. I will say this. I think the Notre Dame return game is going to surprise a lot of people this year.
Mm.
I think they built the foundation last year under Brian Mason, a firm foundation, and now they start to build the other levels of special teams to an equal level of what we saw from the punt block unit, John Sott having a really good season, and having more consistency as a place kicker and kickoffs. I think that's coming along on the second and third levels as Brian Mason continues to build that special teams unit. I think you're going to see some big time returns. I think they returned 2 punts for a touchdown and maybe even 1 kickoff this year. I think that's one of the surprises I'm looking forward to seeing coming forth in the 2023 season.
Yeah, special teams. Yeah, definitely seeing some action in the punt return game, the kick return game, us making efforts. Maybe even see one of them double reverses in the kickoff where we catch it and run and toss it to the guy going, seeing some creativity or effort. That phase of the game is proven to really help stimulate our offense and even lead to a huge blowout that many people didn't expect, because our third phase of the game really came in play, and even the other team noticed it as the game-changing effort that took them out. And I think that's something we can expand on and keep teams strategizing against us, like USC, where they didn't even let us get out there.
Yeah.
So it shows that we are making great strides in that area, but we need to have an impactful guy. And I know that we got a lot of guys that can catch punts, but how many are punt returners? You see how I did that? We had guys that's fielding punts, like just back there just waiting on. We don't need guys that are out there fielding balls. We need a guy that's going to golden retrieve that thing and bring it back. You know what I mean? Like I can hire somebody out of the stands and just go back there and catch it. This is not a walk-on position that's a classic Rudy thing that we just nominate a Make-A-Wish Foundation for somebody to go out there and just field punts. This is a special teams unit.
Mm-hmm.
What they call it, bomb squad? or something like that. It's about getting it and coming, changing the field position.
Yeah,
You get
yeah,
it and want to start as far as the punt took it.
yeah, yeah,
I don't understand that.
yeah. I think they have some punt returners. If we're just going strictly by the freshman class that's incoming, it's at least 3 punt returners, elite punt returners in that class. You have to be
Yeah,
able to trust them. And I think there were a couple in the 22 class that just didn't get the opportunity. You just have to be able to trust them. But the first thing with Brian Mason is catching the ball. Catching the ball. That's the first thing to punt returning. Anthony Solomon. Now this is I put this up left because it's interesting. What is crazy to me, he says, is all of these guys we noticed as breakout players, and the team went 9-4. One would think the record would have been better. First, I just want to clarify: there's a difference between surprise and breakout players, in my
yeah,
opinion. We're saying guys that surprised us. I wouldn't exactly call a breakout player means you've gone to a status of like star, and I don't think anyone went to that status. But I think because of lower expectations, I think there are some guys that surprised us. Like I think Howard Cross played very well. Zeke Carrell played. I wouldn't call Zeke Carrell an all American center, but he was really good. He was really good.
yeah. I think he's really good for what we asked him to do.
He was really good. I would love for him to pick up just a little bit more weight, but he's so good technically in using leverage. Yeah, I'm
And
good.
you're
You know
right.
what? You know another surprise? I have a surprise. Another surprise. Notre Dame is going to have a wide receiver go over 800 yards receiving.
Possible,
Somebody's going to pop this year.
possible.
I don't know who, but somebody's going to pop.
We can predict who most likely. I don't think we're a team built on surprise players because surprise players aren't trusted players.
Hmm.
And we know how that trusting works offensively. Defensively, we've seen Jalen Snead get in and Prince Colley get in and, some flashes of some guys, but we're pretty much an experienced semi-veteran team that likes to roll out there more than not. We not unless a major injury like how Ben Morrison got in. I think that qualifies as a surprise because it's surprising he played that early.
Yeah,
He's a surprise that became a breakout player because then he started not only played early, then he started doing crazy things,
yeah.
Became the top player on the defense.
Another surprise I would say in 2023 is going to be Notre Dame's going to have a double-digit sack artist. I know you put the ceiling at about
No,
8.
throw some names.
I'm gonna go with my boy Jordan Botello.
Hmm. If he's starting
Josh
full
Burnham.
time,
Look,
maybe.
I keep telling people this. Josh Burnham, when people finally get to see him play.
But if he has 7 sacks, that's good though for Josh Burnham. That's what I'm hearing from you being, oh, he's gonna surprise, he's gonna do so. 7 sacks is that's what it sounds like to me.
Wait a minute, how did you just put a number to that?
Because if it was 10 plus, you wouldn't be saying, I think he's gonna show a lot of people this and that. Like Fauski wasn't showing a lot of people. Fauski was out there getting the sacks he was getting with the expectation of trying to break the record. Josh is like, I think it's gonna surprise some guys. So surprising people or coming on the scene, he's starting with 7. Because if that's the case, is he going to start and have the snaps to even get that many opportunities to get that 10 plus? If he's surprising people and coming on the scene, I think if it was a Riley Mills, you were saying that on about where he's on the field 90% of the time. Math is math, and he has the higher chance of getting 10 plus. But does Riley have the motor to get 10 plus? That's another question. It's another question. I think a solid 10 plus guy, he doesn't even – who's starting full time now that can get 10 plus? Not guys that are coming in.
Like, I mean, I have to project the starting lineup. I mean, we lost
meaning that nobody's been getting enough reps full time to be in shape to be getting 10 sacks a season, unless they just become an all-star player, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody's been playing part-time. Ain't nobody get the benefits of the dental and the vision and the healthcare.
Right.
They've been on 1099s. Contractors come in third down, come in first and second, get about 30, 40 snaps, even with the young linebackers. I think the young linebackers are going to be productive, but it's like you said, it's still undetermined. Everybody's been kind of getting their toe in the water, but nobody truly in the deep end where you can lean on a high productive projection yet, unless we recruited like some monsters, unless we got Chase Young on that deal. I think Tyson Ford can have a huge impact, but it'll be like it's not
absolutely.
Gonna be like, okay, we're not gonna have the Eagles D line where every guy that's starting has 10 sacks, 10 or more sacks.
No, this is not about to be the Philadelphia Eagles.
The Eagles have 70 sacks on the season. Everybody has 10 plus. But I think we'll have a good amount of sacks, but it's by committee. I think everybody will have Pepper in 6, Pepper in 5, maybe.
Yeah.
Pepper in a high like 8, and maybe the team leader. But I don't see anybody just getting, all right, I don't need to be double teamed every game.
But maybe that is the best, right? Expecting Isaiah Foskey to carry the load in that area, and now spreading things out across the two deep to whereas you get 4 from this guy, 4 from this guy, 4 from this guy. And collectively, if you have 6 or 7 guys giving you 4 to 5 sacks,
you good. Yeah. Now
you may be more dangerous than just depending upon Isaiah Foskey, who, all-time sack leader, first round pick projected in the draft.
Think about it. We got the all-time sack leader, the greatest winningest quarterback.
We'll see. We'll see. It was fun talking about the surprises of 2022 and projecting some of the surprises that may come with Notre Dame football in 2023. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe. Smash that like button. Hit the notification bell. Go to CFB Nation in conjunction with Irish Breakdown for all of our great content. It's the Lucky Lefty Podcast. We spin it different. It was a pleasure to have Manny Navarro on yesterday talking about the path of 5 stars in his article on The Athletic. And now it's indeed a pleasure to have on a previous guest. To me, he's a legend in the business. Fox Sports, The Athletic, author. He's done everything. And we consider him, like we said, to be a legend in the business. So we welcome to the Lucky Lefty Podcast once again, Bruce Feldman. Bruce, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. A legend just means I'm old. That's all that means.
Oh, never that. Never that. Because we feel like Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow are legends right now. And they're young because they're doing things. We just talked about it. They're anomalies. Like the blessing of an athlete like those two to be able to come in and still develop and win as you develop. Because I don't think we've seen the peak from either one of those guys yet in their games, but they're still winning. And both of them will still probably have at least one Super Bowl, maybe. Patrick Mahomes might have 2 in another month or so. So we talked about that a little bit earlier on before you came on, that Tom Brady and rest in peace Kobe Bryant might have been 2 of the most blessed athletes to be able to come into situations as young as they were and get better and build winning resumes as they got better. And then once they became who they were, they just took off and continued to win. So that's not the path for most of these guys. And it's not the path of what you talked about for a lot of these athletes going from high school football to college football and what ends up being the best players in the NFL. I thought you wrote an incredible article on in the Athletic, and it really dealt with scouting, right? Because most people just think finding great players in college football is all about read the report, who is the 5-star, go recruit those guys, and in college, that might win you some games. But scouting, not only from high school, but specifically college to the NFL, it's a little more than that to really find the jewels like a Justin Jefferson, like a Devontae Adams, or a Josh Jacobs, which you highlighted in your article.
Yeah, it is hard. I think the thing that was fascinating to me was the best players in the NFL. On the defensive side, there's a lot of carryover from who was the 5-stars in high school. The only guys who were the outliers on the defense were Aaron Donald, was a former 3-star. You know, you had Slay, who's a terrific defensive back who played in the SEC. He's a 3-star. And then you had Fred Warner, was a 4-star. And Roquan Smith was a 4-star. Everybody else were 5-stars, whether it was, you know, Derwin James or Bosa or Myles Garrett or, you know, Dexter Lawrence. Those are guys who are like have this wow factor. I think people see that it's way more of a crapshoot on the offensive side. We know the quarterback evaluation is tricky. We know the offensive line is probably the hardest. But, you know, the guys you mentioned, you know, you'd sit there and go, wow, Devontae Adams was only a 2-star. Like, how did people miss on him? And it's not like he was in like the Dakotas, you know, he was in Northern California. But I think maybe people looked at him as more of a basketball prospect, that he was a little raw. Justin Jefferson to me is fascinating because he was in a talent hotbed. Again, I can kind of understand that if it's players who are, you know, kind of, I don't want to say in the middle of nowhere, but in places that a lot of coaches don't get to. You know, so you have guys, whether it's like a TJ Hawkinson or, you know, guys who are, you know, come from, you know, or end up at Iowa or end up at Wisconsin. Maybe those aren't places that a lot of people get to. Then there's the guys who are just kind of the late bloomers physically, right? Aaron Rodgers now is much taller than he was coming out of high school. And I just think, you know, sometimes we get caught up, not just we in the media, but I think we on social media get caught up in, oh, this guy was a high 4-star or a 5-star, he must be great. And you kind of write off, we're kind of the ones who maybe were under the radar and they just keep working and maybe have a bigger chip on their shoulder because they keep working because they were doubted.
When you were with us last time, you said one of the areas that Notre Dame had to improve in recruiting was the skill positions on offense. And I noticed that the skill positions, well, you kind of teased it right there. Those are the areas where it's not necessarily about going out and getting the 5-stars. It's about finding some of those jewels that can come in and make a difference.
Yeah, and look, I think they're well positioned. I mean, Dylan McCullough to me is about as good a running back coach as there is in football. And, you know, going into last year, I think the most dynamic back, or one of the maybe the most gifted back he had, was a freshman they brought in. I think he tore his Achilles back in June or July, and he never even had a chance to go. And they still, you know, those backs stepped up, and I think they'll be good in that position. And I think they'll keep getting better. But yeah, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see what happens now. You have Sam Hartman coming in. He is very experienced and he's a lot of ability. You know, we'll see what happens with Buckner. He looked pretty good at the end of the year once he got, you know, back to being healthy. We know he can really run. I'm interested to see what happens in year 2. I know you guys, you know, focus on Notre Dame a lot, and you know, it was obviously a rocky start. But they, you know, I think the way they finished the year, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism, because I think the way that Marcus Freeman's staff seems to be recruiting, I think they're taking big swings, and I think he probably resonates better with a lot of kids maybe than what, you know, how they saw Notre Dame 10 years ago. Not all kids saw it that way, but I think he probably has more reach in who he can kind of get in the ear of.
Now you mentioned Sam Hartman coming and being an addition. is seeing the trend of college football being the league of really old quarterbacks or quarterbacks that are generational guys. Where does that leave the middle of the pack of the quarterbacks that are everywhere else in college football? If the championships are coming from the young superstar, like just starting out, but he's been highly touted, or the 26-year-old that's been transfer, or had a bunch of years left.
I mean, look, I did a story that went up on The Athletic 2 days ago. It was the scouting report of Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy was interesting in that obviously he played in a Power 5 level, but he wasn't a big recruit coming out of high school. But he played a ton of football at Iowa State. And he's a good athlete, not a great athlete. There was nothing he did physically that I think wowed scouts. And so, I was able to get the scouting report of one specific NFL team and what they had on him. They did not think he was a draftable guy because there was nothing that really kind of wowed them. And his athleticism, which is probably one of his better traits, along with his smarts, they just were like, okay, not that fired up about it because they didn't think his athleticism. He ran for 1,200 yards in college, but in the NFL, I mean, and this particular coach put it to me like this. He said, in college, Tim Tebow, Zach Wilson, Johnny Manziel all look really fast. In the NFL, those guys get run down fast by linebackers and DNs. And I think sometimes we in the media and certainly a lot of fans of these schools go, well, that guy worked out. I saw him make plays in college. Well, this is a whole different world he's going into. And so what's been great for Brock Purdy is he went into an ideal situation. The things that he does really well, I think, fit with what Kyle Shanahan can accentuate. He is very savvy and he's very mature. And I think some of those things translate well to what they want to do team-wise offensively with motions and shifts and checks and different things. But also, he's got the best left tackle in the NFL, and he's got a terrific tight end, and Deebo Samuel's a special weapon. He's got McCaffrey, and they also have a really, really good defense. So I think it's different than if you're, say, some generational kind of talent like a Cam Newton, but you're going in and you don't have that much around you.
Like a Deshaun Watson at Houston.
Yeah. I mean, there are guys like that. They go into such bad situations and it's like, you're just plugging your finger in a bunch of different holes and the water just keeps hitting you in the face. I think that is really, it's hard because certain guys go into situations where in the case of Purdy, he went into an ideal situation. It was a perfect fit for him. Doesn't mean he maybe, whether we're going to talk about ceilings or, if you ask me, like in this story we did, I asked the coach, I said, knowing what you know now and what you've seen from him in the NFL, what kind of grade would you put on him now? And he goes, I don't know, probably a second or third round grade. And people are like, why is he not a first round? Well, he's not a first round pick because they're not asking him to do the stuff like that.
Trevor Lawrence is doing.
So I think there's different asks of what people, he's a good athlete. He's not Lamar, I think people have to, you can have success, but it's different systems are setting you up for success in that regard. What may work well for Daniel Jones, Daniel Jones is not Joe Burrow, and he's, certainly not like Lamar Jackson or some of these other guys who are really carrying the offense in a different way.
How much do you think interesting case of a guy like Trevor Lawrence having the year he did his rookie year compared to the dramatic 360 that it took, or 180 it took with Doug Peterson, new coaching staff? Is it the system or is it the talent that's proven king in this situation?
I mean, I think it's really both, because no matter how talented you are, if everything else around you is dysfunctional, I don't know how you make that work, right? Like if you put Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes has incredible arm talent and he's a terrific athlete in terms of extending plays and how his mind works, and he's really bright and he's determined and all these other things, but he's got Andy Reid. And Andy Reid is a great fit for him. I remember one specific example of talking to somebody who wasn't a believer in Patrick Mahomes coming out of Texas Tech. He didn't win much. Now, he had a terrible defense, but he was in the Big 12. And I think this is absolutely not to diminish Patrick Mahomes, because I think he's awesome. But like, he's in a really good situation with terrific coaches around him. And he's also, he's got the best tight end in football. And for a while, he had the fastest player in football there, So I just think if you stuck him in Jacksonville in 2021 with Urban coaching it and a lot of new pieces around, man, I don't, are they 2-11? Like, I don't remember what they finished. I know what they were when Urban got fired.
Number 1 pick.
Yeah. But I mean, like, if you put Patrick Mahomes in Jacksonville last year,
are they a number 1 pick? I mean, because Trevor's proved to not look that bad. He looks pretty good.
I mean, Trevor's definitely talented, and his intangible is really good. I don't know if it's unfair to say if he's Patrick talented, but that's like, we could be talking the difference between Michael Jordan and like, I don't know, Scottie Pippen or something. Like, we could talk like, he could be a Hall of Fame talent. He may not be, quite what Patrick is, but he needs help, but he also needs, he also needs structure. And, that's why I think if I don't think Tom Brady would have gone to Jacksonville if it was open, because he'd be like, I'm not going to do that, because that's like, that's not going to help me. I mean, it's an interesting kind of rabbit hole to go down. Like how bad, like I think and look, you played it at a high level, but I think there are certain sports where if you put the best of the best in it, how much would they be hindered by the dysfunction, right? In football, I think you're probably going to be more hindered by the dysfunction than, like, I'm not saying, I could coach, the teams that Phil Jackson coached to winning NBA championships, but I'm pretty sure, like, if you had a coach who didn't know what they were doing and he had Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and a bunch of other guys, they're still going to probably go to the NBA finals or still be a playoff team. They're not going to be a lottery team coming out of that, no matter, like, I could go in there and they'd be like, yeah, we're tuning him out. We know what we're doing. In football, obviously there's just so much more that goes into it. And, it's like an interesting thing because of that. I think it's like it's like taking a huge batting donut off for Trevor Lawrence to go into the on deck circle to go have Doug Peterson and another year. And I think that perspective, and good for him that it didn't scar him, or, because we've seen quarterbacks, like, not Derek Carr, David Carr, was a talented quarterback, but he got sacked like 120 times or whatever it was his rookie year. And it just seemed like, you're seeing ghosts from that point on.
Once again, we have Bruce Feldman on with us, Fox Sports, and also The Athletic right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast. We spin it different. It's interesting because in the story we read that Manny Navarro wrote about the 5 stars, basically the path for most of these 5 stars, it was shocking how many of these guys, I think it was 34 total from the 2022 class, and I maybe believe 78% of those guys had 0 snaps as a freshman. And like, people don't realize just because you're a 5-star doesn't mean that you're going to make an impact immediately. And the path taken for most is to really start making an impact and get defensive snaps or offensive snaps as sophomores. That's what Jalen Sneed did for Notre Dame. You saw him come along late in the game and then play in the bowl game. But I'm interested into what it's really about with 5 stars in the minds of these young men when they're making their decisions. Because you take a school like Georgia and Alabama, where they have winning when they walk into someone's school or they talk to a young man. They can put that out front unlike anyone else. And then for a school like Notre Dame that's trying to be a leader of the new school, or a leader of the new pack, a new contender, when they don't have that winning, they have to use things like, just for example, people say, man, offensive linemen want to go to Alabama because look at how many they put in the first round. And my retort to that, my counter to that is, yeah, but when you look at the NFL, who become better offensive linemen? the Notre Dame offensive lineman or the Alabama offensive lineman. So now you take your pick. When you're choosing this school, do you just want to go in the first round and be okay, or do you want to come to Notre Dame and end up being Mike McGlinchey, Aaron Banks, Zach
Quentin.
Martin, Quinn Nelson, Ronnie Stanley? It's like, it's an interesting thing. Is that the way you think Marcus Freeman and the staff have to attack, going after these kids, giving them a different perspective on what they may be looking for?
Yeah, and I think look, you have the O-line coach there now again, who developed a lot of these guys. Not saying it's easy, but that should be the easiest sell for them,
Right.
right? I mean, the big sell is, and like, Malik can definitely speak to this better than anybody because he got it. But like, if you are somebody who is a high level student, and if they, if like you're in the conversation with them, you must have been a really, really good student in high school. I think you can sell, hey, this is what not just this degree means, but this is what this network means, right? In terms of like, I've heard stories. I didn't go to Notre Dame, but I know a lot of Notre Dame people about like, okay, if you're a lacrosse player, this is the environment and these are some of the opportunities can have for you down the road. We're not even talking about like NIL stuff. We're talking about like, like, it's not fair for me to say like, oh, when other people say this is a 50-year decision, when other schools talk about it, it's like, that sounds cliche. But Notre Dame has a lot of this stuff that it's not lip service if you know a bunch of Notre Dame people, right? So if I'm them, and I'm sure Marcus Freeman is doing this, and I'm sure all his assistants do this, but like, that's the thing you're hammering home. Because that is a differentiator. But the other thing I think is big is there are now there was a stretch, and I remembered, you mentioned Ronnie Stanley, but there was a stretch with maybe before him where Notre Dame had gone a long time without like an elite NFL draft prospect. Not to say there weren't good players, but like then you started to have a bunch, and maybe they were old linemen, but they were still players. And I think the thing you got to hit on is like, oh, if I was a tight end or if I was an offensive lineman, I'm definitely listening to Notre Dame, right? And then if I was a defensive lineman, I would start to think about that in my head too, because it's like, hey, this is what you're going to go up against every day at practice. This will help you. I think that should be something now would be hammered home. The tricky part to me is, how do you get the receivers to listen? I don't know why. Like Notre Dame, a long time ago,
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Bruce, you there?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Did we lose Malik?
I think we did, but you were talking
Okay.
about how to get the wide receiver.
Yeah. So what's weird is there was a long time ago back in the like.
You got me, Bruce?
I got you.
I don't know what's going on.
I don't think he's too lucky right now.
LL Nation. All right.
You got me?
Yeah, I got you. You were saying about the wide receivers. You go right ahead.
Yeah. So, this to me is a running back thing though. And this is where if the thing that is kind of a little bit of confusing or a little bit that doesn't make sense to me is you go back now, it's about 30 years. There was a group with Jerome Bettis. You had a group, I think Dorsey Levens, who ended up going to Georgia Tech and had a really good NFL career, was there. I think Ricky Waters was in that window. Like this was a loaded running back room, right? Notre Dame has gotten some high 4 and maybe even some 5-star running backs. None of them have turned out to be like a wow guy in terms of like, they're not Reggie Bush. They're not like even the notch below. Maybe they're like 2 notches below, right? So Darius Walker was a good running back. You've had
Buford, Georgia,
yeah, you've had guys who are good running backs, but like you have the best, offensive line factory in the country to run behind. That should be really enticing for them. They are not like an air raid where they're going to throw the ball, for 4,500 yards. You are going to get carries. Like I would think that would be, plus you have the Notre Dame machine behind you where if you are that, again, I'm not saying you need to be, Reggie Bush, but if you are a really, really talented running back, I would think you say, hey, I get to play behind this kind of caliber offensive line. I'm going to have this kind of spotlight on me. I could win a Heisman here. Now, it's not like Notre Dame has been cranking out Heisman guys of late, but I think that would be a selling point. I'm just surprised that they haven't been able to get, more elite talent in there, so it's been a head scratcher to me that they haven't been able to upgrade there.
So it's interesting. You're basically saying take your strengths and your message should be, this is what you work against every year. And this is what's going to make you better and make you a pro in this program, and do that until they can get to the point that they can walk in with a championship and say, hey, you come here to win championships.
Exactly.
Speaking of championships, how long did it take you to realize that game wasn't going to be close in the national championship?
Yeah, it was, because TCU had some wild comebacks, you gave them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
You'd seen them. But once you saw that they just could not have answers to get off the field on defense, you're like, oh, this is going to be, it's going to be like 49-17 kind of game. It was even worse, but and we'd seen that before, a game that, look, Notre Dame got run out of the building by Alabama. It felt even more lopsided because you're like, whoa, this team's not built to come back like that. Whereas TCU, you're like, okay, we've seen them make some wild comebacks, but it was just a blowout. It was a bloodbath. And to be in there at the beginning where I think, if you think back, and I was at the Fiesta Bowl, almost everything that could have gone right for TCU did. They had 2 pick sixes. There was Michigan kind of got too cute in the red zone a couple of times inside the 5. They had another touchdown, which should have probably counted as a touchdown, didn't. So they were kind of digging out of a hole the whole time, which isn't really, ideal for Michigan. They're not built to really do that. And it was a pretty tight game for 4 quarters. You have 2 pick sixes and you have some, red zone meltdowns on top of that. That should be a blowout. It wasn't even that. So I think, look, it was an awesome year for TCU, and I think they were a fun story to watch. But it was a bad matchup for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. As we move forward, there's Left right there. You back, Left?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
I don't know either. But we were just talking about that national championship matchup, and I'm very interested because we're going to get ready to let Bruce go. We appreciate you giving us some time today, Bruce. The evolution of college football as it transitions from the 14 playoff to the 12-team playoff. How much of an impact do you think this is really going to have on what we see, not during the playoffs, but I'm very interested in seeing how coaching staffs and players approach the regular season now, knowing that, man, if I have one loss and I'm pretty sure we're going to get in, like, do you start resting guys? Do you give guys the week off in college football? Do you think it's going to start to change how coaches approach roster management?
I mean, I don't think it would, just because I think they know they're still dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-olds. If you start getting into like throttling down, that's when bad stuff happens, you know? And I don't think enough of these teams, I mean, look, Alabama almost lost twice, once to Texas A&M, who was horrible this year. And it's like, if you say, hey, we're going to rest, in this case, they weren't resting Bryce Young, but they were playing, he was injured. But like, all it takes is a couple turnovers. And then what happens if you lose that game? You can probably get in, but all of a sudden now you're, like, you run the risk of now you have to play an extra game. You don't get that bye. Who knows if you get an injury there? I just think it's like, it's definitely stuff to think about. But I think, this isn't the NFL where it's like, you just see like a couple, one thing I can think of is there was a year where Oklahoma had just a loaded team. Adrian Peterson was the star of the team. Jason White won the Heisman. And they were rolling through the Big 12, and then they got smashed by Kansas State in a game which they didn't really need to play in or win, because they still went to the title game. They got smashed by K-State, and then they got blown out by USC. Now, USC is certainly more talented than K-State, but like, I think it's just like momentum is a tricky thing with college kids. It's just, to me, it's way different than the NFL. And I think no matter who the coach is, I think you got to be careful if you're throttling up and throttling down too much.
You wrote a book years ago, The Quarterback, The Making of Modern Quarterbacks.
Great book.
It was a really good book. Do you think the game has kind of matched what you kind of thought and predicted in that book? Or do you think things have even gone further in the evolution of the modern quarterback and beyond what you ever thought it would be? When you start to see Caleb Williams, when you start to see Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis is at the top. You have Drake May, who's coming next year. I think Anthony Richardson is one of the most talented prospects. He's not polished, but that dude has a cannon, can run. He's strapping, big. Just what you see now going to the NFL and then coming on in college football. Are you surprised that it's gotten to this point?
Not like, from being around it, and I was around that Elite 11 group, what I really was at the core of that book was the private coach quarterback industry. And that thing is ramped up so much. Initially it was just guys in California, maybe. Now all of a sudden those businesses are everywhere. And, some are legit, some are maybe a little more snake oil. But I do think the investment that kids, their families, and these coaches have put in is just skyrocketed. Now, what was on the front end of that book, I spent some time with Tom House, who's like the leading, sports biomechanics guy in the country. That has really jumped, really skyrocketed too. So I think so much more attention is put in that space. Like the stuff Aaron Rodgers was kind of like the be all end all guy in terms of the stuff he was doing off platform and some of those things. And, like, I don't know how old Pat Mahomes was when I was working on that book. He was probably a high school sophomore maybe, but you see like all the people who've been influenced by that. And so it was really interesting to see how that took off from there. And look, I think what's harder now is there's so much more of a spotlight on these kids, and they're still kids. They're 16, 17, 18 years old. They're really talented. They have a lot of people coming at them. They have way more exposure now because of social media. And that can be a good thing and that can be a bad thing. But like the Caleb Williamses of the world, and he's definitely gifted, but they're coming out of that same incubation world that I was talking about, where they spent a bunch of time going to these quarterback places and doing everything they can to maximize when they get that shot. And, it's, sometimes it's going to work out. A lot of times it's not. The thing I've tried to kind of take a perspective on is, a kid who can get that opportunity and allow, a lot of times they're transferring more than they ever did before, is, this kid who might have been a 4-star and maybe didn't have, or maybe even a 5-star, and did not have on the field the success other people had, hyped him up to be. But then you're looking like, oh, this kid has 2 college degrees. You can't say anybody's a bust if they've got like 2 big degrees coming out of high school and they probably didn't have to pay for it. I mean, they paid for it, but not, they were on scholarship and all the opportunity they had. So I think it's really, and I get why parents are so invested in it, because, they see not the, I don't know, is Caleb a 1 in a million story? Was Tiger Woods a 1 in a billion story? Was, the Williams sisters in tennis? Like, I think there's a lot of parents by the same, token. Like, I remember talking to Stetson Bennett's dad, it's not that different. It's just, he had to go the walk-on route because he didn't, physically have these, wow factor, traits. But I think there's a lot of people there who will sit there and go, if we rep this and work on this enough, and if our kid really loves it, maybe they have a chance. Now, maybe they're not going to be, maybe they're not going to eventually be anything close to Caleb or Stetson Bennett. But and I don't know if Malik crossed paths with the person I mentioned, but when I worked on that book, one of George Whitfield's little baby brothers was this kid who was his ball boy, Chase Griffin. And Chase doesn't have the biggest arm, and he's a good athlete, but not a great athlete. But he's from Texas, and he was a prolific quarterback in Texas high school football. It was the Gatorade play. He's legit. He got a scholarship at UCLA. He played a little, he did pretty well in the moments he did, but he's basically been the number 2 or number 3 behind DTR. But that kid graduated in less than 3 years, is making a fortune in NIL because he is really, really smart and has a lot of ingenuity, and he's taken advantage of all these other things. And I think there's, those are the stories where, okay, maybe he's not going to play in a Super Bowl, but that is a huge success story. And I think there's probably more of those out there than we realize. And I think they all kind of, some of them have roots in that QB space.
That's dope. I wish a lot of parents would look at it from that standpoint, that the scholarship is the actual blessing and the seed that can really flourish into something for the rest of your life, rather than trying to think that your kid is the next Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, which is, almost like buying a lottery ticket and hoping that your numbers pop up. It's amazing as always to have you on the show, Bruce, and let the fans know what you're working on, because I know you always have something going on in your mind of what you want to tap into when it comes to the NFL or college football.
Yeah, I'm just working on some draft stuff that I'll get ready for it. I got a few things that I'm just kind of, I like the evaluation space and everything in this time of year, and I'm a big NFL fan. So, that's the kind of stuff. If people haven't checked out the Brock Purdy story, I think it'll be interesting for them, just because it's a behind the scenes look at what the actual NFL team saw, and now what one of the coaches who wasn't a believer before, how he's seen it and how it fits. It's not like he's coming around trying to say, oh yeah, that guy is Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. He's definitely not saying that. No. But I think it's a good perspective for people to peek behind the curtain and know what it is.
Do you believe all of this noise that number 1 pick that the Bears hold really doesn't have value because no one's going to jump up to get one of these quarterbacks? That's what's being said early. And I'm like, the quarterbacks are always highly valued in drafts.
Yeah, I don't know if they're sitting back and going, well, Caleb and Drake May are coming out next year and we feel a little more confident. I really like CJ Stroud. I get why there's a little hesitation on Bryce, because Bryce isn't the biggest, Bryce checks off every box but the physical, the maybe the durability concern. But, it's beauty's in the eye of the beholder, I'm interested to see how it works out with, Justin Fields is a special athlete, who's fun to watch, and keep seeing how he can develop. He hadn't played all that much college football, right? So I want to see how that plays out for them. And, it's
just get that accuracy right.
Yeah. It's look, to me, the best example is the guy in Philly who has a burning desire to get better. And coaches kid, super strong, super determined. And I think if you ask people close to him who work with him, I know, because I've done this, they didn't see this, and it's fine that they didn't see it, because I'm pretty sure Jalen saw it, and he's probably the only one who saw it. Maybe his parents did, but that he would do this stuff, and I am definitely, became an Eagles fan when he got there, just because we did a bunch of Oklahoma games, and I would hear have these conversations with him. And that like the burning desire probably can only take you so far. It's still, there's got to be, he's obviously really gifted on top of it. But like, that is the stuff that I think is really, like if you're Justin Fields, like you look and see how much Jalen Hurts has developed as a passer, like credit to him, his guy Quincy, a lot of work with him. I think the Eagles certainly have, Brian Johnson, it sounds like has had a big role too. But it starts with him. And look, Justin Fields is a special athlete. Maybe he can do some of those same things if, because like I said, I think there was a lot of hesitation on how good of a passer Justin was or would be. And I think some of those same questions were with Jalen, and Jalen is, in the MVP running.
Bruce Feldman, right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast. Bruce, we appreciate you. And we'll talk to you sometime close to the season.
Sounds great, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. Once again, that was Bruce Feldman, Fox Sports, The Athletic. We apologize, LL Nation, for the technical difficulties. He hit right. He was in the middle of a great point, too, because he was giving us the counters and the answers of how Notre Dame can kind of recruit against, what Georgia and Alabama would say when it comes to those 5 stars. But we're so happy that he came on with us and gave us that great information today. Let's get to these super chats before we get out. Truman Theodore Dumel says, how can we get ahead of the curve in recruiting so our season isn't another sob story and we finish with some Busta Rhymes energy? They got 7 recruits already in the class, and it's January. I don't.
It's to be determined.
Yeah, I don't. This is their first full season as a staff. I tell people all the time, I choose to be happy. The staff got together last year in March, bro. March. And put together a top 10 class.
That's right.
And had a legit opportunity to land the number 1 and number 2 players in the class that were committed to the class at one point in time. And they got together in March. So now they have a full year. They have 7 in the fold. And probably in the next month or so, they'll add another 2 or 3.
That's right.
So, I feel good. Doma Wap, thank you so much for tapping in as always. Big surprise. Going back to the conversation, the first half of the show. Evidently, Marcus Freeman potentially utilizing NCAA rules, allowing new coaches to jettison players off the roster to an academic scholarship. Understandably strong feelings on both sides. Thoughts? I don't know in particular. I don't have a problem with new coaches coming in saying, I would rather go get Jeremiah Love than this guy. I don't have a problem at all.
Yeah. Neither do I.
That's you have an tough decision, right? Right? Dude, we've had tough decisions in life. Everybody, whether you move from one service to another, or you choose someone else, you have that conversation in integrity, tell them the truth, let them know it's done, and you move on to what you have chosen to do in the future. It's as simple as that. I think a lot of people feel a certain way because you're dealing with teenagers and you worry about their feelings. But, college football is a business. So at the end of the day, you just heard Bruce Feldman tell you Dylan McCullough is one of the best running back coaches in all of college football. If he comes in and says, this dude isn't the standard that we want at running back, then Marcus Freeman should listen to him. Adam Shipley, thank you for the super chat. If we lose Justin Scott, does it cost Washington his job?
Too early to say.
Nah, there's so much more to the position. So I don't think he would lose his jobs because of that.
Jobs that quick.
Yeah. It would definitely go in the ledger, right?
Yeah, it's definitely being docked.
It's being docked. Facts. It would definitely end up being docked if a decision were to be made in the future on his job security. So speaking
It's
of
one of them.
justice,
It's one of them. Okay, I got
yeah,
you.
yeah.
All right. I hear you.
Uh, Speaking of Justin Scott, Notre Dame will be in Chicago. Matter of fact, I think Tommy has been here since I think he was here earlier in the week. Tommy is really taking this invest in Chicago to heart. Like he's putting in work. Uh, they'll be at his game on Friday. I don't know what other people are saying. I know what he told me when I spoke to him on Tuesday. He intends to visit Notre Dame this weekend, and I'm sure they'll confirm that on Friday night at his game, and then we'll see where everything goes from there. You know what has happened, left, and the way things have played out is not a shock to me
Right.
at all, because what has happened is what he originally told me. Focus on the basketball season, take a few more official visits, and then make my decision because I'm ready to be done with it. So I don't see this being dragged out. I think he will take official visits to certain schools that he's really interested in, and then he'll make his decision. And he flat out told me, bro, he flat out told me he was choosing Notre Dame. He was like, yeah, I was coming to Notre Dame. He flat out said it. He said that was going to be my choice. But like I said, everybody in college football knew that.
Everybody.
Everybody knew that. That's why Kirby, Ryan Day, Jim Harbaugh, that's why they all teamed up together to say, yo, slow down. Like, we know your choice. We just want you to make sure that you go through the process, because you don't want to make that decision and then have second thoughts. And, you have visits. You should take your visits. They started collectively
Hating.
collectively recruiting just to kind of put the pause on the process. And they were effective in doing so. But once again, I was shocked when he moved it to the 31st because that wasn't what he told me he wanted to do. So all he really did was go back to the original process that he told me he wanted to do. So now we'll
Trying
see.
on some shoes from Oregon.
Hey,
Thumbing
man,
through a
look,
couple bags from Georgia.
man, as always, definitely, by all means, take the Oregon visit. By
Make that
all
shoe
means,
deal happen.
and get that shipment every month, baby. You know what time it is.
Petticoat, petticoat, petticoat junction.
It's time to get petty.
Oh, we did a good job executing.
Are you upset with something?
And fire up the Petticoat Junction train.
I just don't like you.
You don't?
No.
What is today's pettiest story? Petty Junction.
Petty Junction, pettiest story the other day brought to you by Onora Whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com, that premium American whiskey, OnoraWhiskey.com. Your boys talking a lot of trash, bro. Your boys are talking a lot of trash.
Ooh.
This video out there of the Cincinnati Bengals saying they headed to play in the in Burrowhead Stadium. I said that's real disrespectful. That's real disrespectful. Considering that he's only beat Patrick Mahomes there one time.
I don't want to hear that.
Well, he's only beat him one time on the road.
Why are y'all explaining losses?
I'm explaining the joke. You can't make a joke if it doesn't have context.
What's the joke? It's the facts.
That's the problem.
It's literally called Burrowhead
Lost
Stadium.
left again.
No, I'm right here.
Like, yo, you can't have a joke like that
I'm right here. You see me?
saying, we're coming to play in Burrowhead Stadium, and you've only beaten Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead one time.
Wait.
Now, granted, it was a big game. It's AFC Championship
Does he
game.
not see me?
But the other two times you beat him, you were at home. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on. But yeah, Cincinnati Bengals, Petty Train. The Uber driver, the Uber Eats driver, Loyola Chicago, Duquesne. I don't know if you guys saw this. I guess he had to deliver, somebody ordered, and he walked into the stadium and tried to deliver the meal on the court and was like in the action of play. Like, dude, read the room, get a clue, pause, wait for a timeout. It's like, you don't even, like, I don't know if they gave him directions to where their seat was or what his seat was, but it was crazy to see someone trying to deliver Uber Eats at a college basketball game. And man, that was crazy. Absolutely crazy. Like, really? You would think the person that ordered it would at least get up and walk out to meet the guy. To me, that would be the wisest thing to do, right? So you wouldn't have something like that happening. But it is what it is. Lucky Lefty podcast. Man, I don't know what's going on. Thank you to Bruce Feldman for jumping on with us. Left, great show tomorrow. John Garcia Jr. John Garcia Jr. joins us to talk recruiting. Unsigned recruits like Nicholas Harbor, who might be the best athlete in the 2023 class, and everything that's happened in the transfer portal, everything he saw on the All-Star game circuit. We'll talk to John Garcia Jr. tomorrow, State of Recruiting, right here on the Lucky Lefty podcast for the Culture Friday. For Left, Shaun Davis, have a fantastic Thursday. But most of all, you got to make sure that you spin it different.